Hi, I'm Tony Lepore, TWU Local 591 EAP program.
And I'm Ken Morse with Transport Workers Union Local 591. And joining us today is Jamie
Vinck.
See, I knew I could do it, from Recovery Waste. Thank you for joining us, Jamie.
Thank you.
So we've been chatting a little bit about the pandemic and how COVID has affected us. Could you maybe give us some of your thoughts, what you're seeing from your perspective?
Absolutely. So I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Arizona, and I've been working in the addiction space for about 20 years now. And what I've seen since the onset of COVID, and in the field we're calling it the triple pandemic, which is obviously COVID-19 and the racial social injustice and then mental health. Because starting from day one, when we first started to learn about essential workers and stay-at-home orders and all of those kinds of things, the anxiety and the social isolation have just been building and building, and that has created an increase in alcohol use, an increase in drug use. Heck, in some states they deliver marijuana right to someone's home when they're quarantining.
Wow.
Also increase in overdoses and suicides. And so what we're seeing is that people have coping strategies. We all have coping strategies, and they work for us until they become maladaptive, as we call them. And some of our healthy coping strategies, getting together with family, our social circle, church, community groups, book club, they're not available to us.
Right.
And important milestones that we have all just really counted on throughout our lives, almost, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but senses of entitlement. Our only daughter eloped in a room with her husband and a justice of the peace. That sort of thing. I miss my goddaughter's wedding. So those are the things that as human beings, those are our traditions, our sacraments. They're sacred to us.
Sure.
We lost them. And so what we're seeing as a society is that if people have healthy coping strategies, great, but they can become unhealthy like that. And that's where the 2 glasses of wine becomes 4, get more weed delivered to your home, and then the depression sinks in. And so it really is becoming the shadow pandemic of mental illness.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's eye-opening. So let's talk about sadness. Why am I so sad?
So what happens there's one type of depression, it's called a situational depression. And I think we've all had it during COVID-19. And so that's the sort of thing where we're feeling demotivated. Perhaps we're thinking a lot about the past, and we're not able to really engage in things that we know are good for us. And that is often in response to something that happened up to 3 months ago. So let's say, you miss your child's graduation, or God forbid you miss a funeral, those kinds of things, and you're grieving a lost loved one that you couldn't go and memorialize. So you may feel the blues for up to 3 months. Then you start to see the light of day, and we end up experiencing hope and joy again. And we think, this too shall pass, in the words of my late mother. We're going to be okay, all is well. Some folks can't get out of it. And that's where, back in the day, we called it a chemical depression, that there's a chemical imbalance. And now it's referred to as a major depressive disorder. And those are depressive symptoms that have a serious negative impact on our lives. For example, we can't go to work. We can't communicate with our loved ones. We have a lot of family drama. Those commercials that you see for antidepressants, where the dog needs walking and we're not able to even get up and walk the dog. Negative impacts on our life. Some people become so depressed that they even become psychotic. They will hallucinate, and they stop taking care of themselves physically. They can either stop eating or overeat, and those symptoms don't go away. And so that is a depression. That's where we can really get into trouble in terms of either the coping mechanisms that we had talked about, or, God forbid, hopelessness and ultimately self-harm. But sadness will pass. Major depressive disorder, not so much.
So Jamie, when it comes to sadness, is there a magic pill that you can take to just kind of make everything okay again?
Well, I wish it were that simple. And what ends up happening is that if we look at things mind, body, spirit in a holistic way, there are things that we can do in each one of those major categories, if you will, to take care of ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. Exercise, nutrition, prayer, some connection with a spiritual being or higher power, any of those kinds of things will help. To find someone that you trust, someone that you know cares about you, and then to just have little baby steps in terms of things to look forward to and to give you that little lift. So some of the things that we can do, I look at those as my magic pill. My magic pill is yoga and horses. And no matter what, if I've got those in my life, I'm going to be good. Now, antidepressants, if someone, not for sadness, but if someone has a major depressive disorder and they simply cannot shake it, then there are pills that we can take. However, something that's very important to understand with antidepressants is that if one drinks while they're on an antidepressant, the positive impact on it, right out the door. When I was doing a lot of private practice, I would have patients that would come in, they'd be on antidepressants, they'd say, oh, this isn't working. Oh, okay, how much did you drink last week? And so if someone's going to be on an antidepressant, I love when they're in therapy as well, so that they can work on those other coping strategies in addition to the antidepressants. So that was a very long answer to, is there a pill?
No, but that's an important answer, so thank you. Yeah.
So how can I support a family member who's feeling sad?
The most important thing in that is be present. And sometimes, and there's something called hidden depression. And we could do a whole video on hidden depression because that is scary. And those are the people that go around with a big smile on their face all the time, acting as everything's okay. And then there's some sort of event and we lose them. If you are concerned about someone in your world, a coworker, a friend, a cousin, reach out. And they may shun you. They may not say, oh, great, Tony, I'm so happy you called. Call them anyway and tell them you love them and be there for them and let them know that when they do have a moment, you're there no matter what.
So when someone is feeling sad, is the passing of time a hindrance or a help in most cases, or is there a general answer you could give?
Well, if someone is sad and it's in a response, if it's grief, loss, response to a trauma, then the time is your friend and one will heal. And again, that's where this pandemic has been such a difficult thing to work with because we don't have our normal tools. When time passes and the sadness doesn't lift, that's when we know we have a serious problem, and then time is not your friend. That's when we rally the troops and we get support, whatever that looks like in your world.
So Jamie, in our world, in Ken and I's world, we are aircraft mechanics, and in our department alone, we've had 6 alcohol intoxication deaths since December of 2020.
I'm so sorry.
How do we prevent an alcohol intoxication then?
So alcohol intoxication is a very, very interesting phenomenon because we don't know what led up to it. And someone can die in a binge drinking episode, and it can even be an isolated episode when their blood alcohol level gets too high. Again, it's the sort of thing where what we need to do is preventative kinds of things, where they feel support, where we somehow infuse hope into their world, and that they know that they're not alone and that there are other options. Because when someone dies of alcohol intoxication, we simply don't know, was it intentional? It's kind of like an overdose. We just don't know. And so all we can do is to, if we're concerned about someone, is to provide that support and that education. Because quite honestly, I think a lot of people don't know that they can die from drinking too much alcohol. And it may, for people like us that that know a lot about drugs and alcohol, it may not seem possible or feasible that someone doesn't know, but it's true. And so I think education is paramount. And then in terms of alcohol and suicide, if I can just talk about that a little bit, alcohol and suicide, it's very tricky because we know alcohol is a central nervous system depressant, and drinks 1 and 2 make people feel great. Beyond that, the depressant kicks in, inhibitions are lowered, and what happens is people forget the reality or the consequences of their action. Not to mention, people that are intoxicated are much more impulsive to either get behind the wheel of a car or to pick up a firearm. And so those are the kinds of things where, yes, death by alcohol intoxication is common and it's escalating and it's terrifying. Alcohol, as far as I'm concerned, and suicide and self-harm are terrifying as well. The other important component of that is to look at relationship disruption. 90% of all suicides that include alcohol, there was some major relationship disruption in the 6 months before. Think about that.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge.
And would you think that a lot of the people that die by suicide and when they're intoxicated, would you think that they would be classified as an alcoholic? Not always, because they've just got those inhibitions lowered, and they don't necessarily know what they're doing. And so I think we can circle that back to alcohol intoxication. I think the more education we do, the better.
We may have some work to do.
Well, we're here with you every step of the way.
It's my understanding that during the pandemic, alcohol abuse has probably increased. Is that what you're seeing, and do you have any thoughts on maybe what we can do as a result of that?
Well, you're exactly right. Alcohol sales increased during the stay-at-home order in every state, across the board. Alcohol sales went up 65%. Even scarier, hard liquor 75%. And so right now what we get to deal with is the after effect of that as people go back to work, as people deal with this reality and put their lives back together after this past 16 months of God knows whatever that was. We're all putting our lives back together, and what we're seeing in treatment is people are coming in shambles. And so what we can do, again, is to provide education, training, support, and to create the space for people to get help. And I don't much care if it's virtual, live, residential, you name it. We say yes to treatment. It's a step in the right direction.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Tony Lepore with the TWU Local 591 EAP Department.
And I'm Ken Morse with Transport Workers Union Local 591, and thanks again, Jamie, for joining us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime.